It's called a Mantrap. I borrowed this demo from the manufacturer.
It's a digital voice recognition monitor hooked up to an access booth.
NSA uses the same technology to keep people out of restricted areas at Fort Meade.
My name is Martin Bishop. My voice is my passport. Verify me.
And you can't pass through unless your voice print matches the one encoded on the card.
Otherwise, you'll be caught in a steel-reinforced booth while the guards with the shotguns are called.
Hey, everyone. No, I'm still not home. Still not sure where home is. I am somewhere pretty cool, though. I don't know if anybody can guess from my post on social media or from this video where I am right now.
Now he's doing some teaching at the academy, some consulting for the Navy labs.
The facility where I am has me thinking about security controls. We had to go through greeting and everything to get on premises, and then all the different buildings and rooms. There's a lot of different security interlocks depending on which privileges and which sensitivities you're going through. And I wanted to make a little disambiguation video for you on terms that you hear mixed up frequently. Those terms might include Mantrap, Sallyport, Vestibule. Are they the same? Are they different? Let's break it down. Many of us work in, or at least have occasion to visit, facilities with security and access control, right? Sometimes this is a single door, but many of you have likely proceeded through a scenario where there are multiple doors stacked in a sequence. And you can understand why this might be desired in situations requiring higher security and greater control of the flow of people, either to prevent tailgating or simply to prevent people pushing through an area quickly when one single door is open. But what often happens is that any type of installation where there are multiple stacked control points close together, it gets labeled a mantrap. Now, this might be overly pedantic of me, but that's technically not the correct term, so I want to disambiguate things with a short video. Everything we talk about in this video is going to be one example or another of a control vestibule or a security vestibule, but that's not always what a mantrap is. What is a mantrap? A mantrap is a security vestibule where the intended purpose is to simply prevent continuous, unobstructed passage of people. And they do this by allowing the release of only one door or gate at a time. And you might say, yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about here. I've seen that plenty of places. Well, we think of small cubicles like the ones portrayed in fiction.
Hi, my name is Werner Brandis. My voice is my passport. Verify me.
But the key thing here is that there's almost always an option for egress. Unless you get a variance from your local AHJ, you can't actually trap someone anywhere in a civilian structure. You may have seen a mechanism similar to what would properly be called a mantrap in some banks. It's just not for people. Back when I lived in Philly especially, there were a lot of banks like this. So maybe you've been in a place where there's, bulletproof kind of glass or some sort of protective security screen between you and the bank tellers at the counter. And sometimes there's a little slot where you can pass paperwork and so forth. Well, what if you have a larger parcel? What if you have a large stack of paperwork or a lot of bills? There are banks that I can remember, back in South Philly especially, where there was a box. There was an actual box that would only open on one side. And if your side was open, the teller could not open their side. And if they had their side open, mechanically, you just could not open your side. I guess that's just to prevent somebody from, throwing a smoke bomb or a flashbang through to the other side of the wall. True mantraps, however, where it's possible to trap not parcels, but people in that space, even during emergencies, those generally exist only in one context nowadays, and it's not going to be a bank. It's not going to be a data center. It's not going to be a hospital. It's going to be corrections environments. So building code, specifically International Building Code, the IBC, only allows mantraps in group I3 occupancies. So those are going to be all your correction centers, your jails, your prisons, etc. And even then, there still have to be provisions for egress during emergency situations. They're handled by policy and procedure. But that is a mantrap, something where if one door or gate is open, the other one physically can't be outside of some crazy override that's not part of the normal function of the door. Sallyport. All right, another cool term, sometimes spelled with a space, sometimes spelled without a space. Both are correct. What is that? What is a Sallyport? It's an older term for a control vestibule or a control point, and it's almost synonymous with mantrap, but not exactly. This would be typically in the context of a fortified structure. That's where you see them. That's where, if you search this term on stock image sites, you'll see a bunch of old castles, right? So, in the most technical sense, it's not required for a Sallyport to have multiple independent control points, like doors or gates, although this is often how they were almost always imagined and portrayed. The classic Barbican-style entrance to a medieval fortification, right, with a drawbridge and a portcullis. That's how Sallyports were designed over the years. The idea, again, is you kind of create a choke point. You neck down any preceding, advancing group of people so that they are susceptible to your assertion of control over them. In a medieval castle, you did this because you wanted to, drop boiling oil and arrows and things on people through murder holes and loops in the walls. You were interested in keeping people stuck where they were and not letting them leave. You don't see this in the modern civilian contexts. Some people still use the term Sallyport today. Again, this is typically going to be in corrections environments or in military contexts. And I think that mostly has to do with people wanting to sound tough, like they're knights repelling hordes of barbarians and Vikings, when in fact they're, mostly just harassing mothers and kids coming to visit a family member who's locked up on drug possession charges or for driving with a suspended license. And I speak as someone who has visited many folk behind bars. Kara's an interesting example. I know many of you might be thinking of her, and I get all your messages about her. Again, I'd love to offer you some updates about Kara. She's been out of communication for a while. She hasn't had communication privileges, but I hope to speak to her in just a few days, and I'll give you an update soon. Many of the times I've visited her, it's been in a medical context, right? So some of the facilities where she has been held haven't always, I think, been full group I3 occupancies. There's a marked exit. There's egress hardware. They may have featured electronic locks, but those might release upon fire alarm or deployment of sprinklers. Again, I wasn't going to test it when I was there. I wasn't interested in having any more interaction that's negative or anything with the freaking marshals and so forth who are there. But again, in a lot of buildings, everywhere you go, life safety generally trumps building security. Egress has to be allowed. The most control you might see exerted over yourself or others in a modern civilian world especially, these would be controlled exits, sometimes called security exits. I know many of you have seen these, right? They're most often encountered at airports. The idea is to have one-way flow of people. And you have multiple doors, sometimes 2 or 3 or even more doorways or gates, and any attempt to go through the wrong way will be met with interference. Typically, there's going to be a sounder or an alert or sometimes even a vocal announcement on a pre-recorded, stop, you are going the wrong way. And you'll usually encounter locked or even inoperable door hardware if you approach from the wrong direction. These do operate on the principle where doors shouldn't open if another door in the set has not yet closed, right? But I've been in at least a few airports where either due to a faulty sensor or some other error, the door in front of me hasn't opened as quickly as I would like. And a solid push, or at least in one instance back in Philly, a solid boot kick to the door mechanism, that will generally open these doors in the egress direction. Again, you can't prevent people from leaving. Let's talk about the term security interlock. Now, this is what most folk in my industry are actually talking about when they throw the word mantrap around. Often this is used where security is more critical, right? So you're talking data centers, money counting rooms at casinos. Both doors are normally closed and locked, right? So unlocking has to happen with some valid credential, usually an electronic credential. And the way these are often built, because electronic access control is generally required, you have actual electronic power shunt. So if one door is used and is open, that will actually shunt the reader on the opposite door. until the first door closes and successfully relocks. The idea is to prevent somebody from using the access control reader, even if they have an authorizing token or code or PIN or anything like that, prevent someone from using the other door if the first one is not yet closed. But again, here's the key thing. These are procedural enforcement controls, not restrictions of people's movement in the case of emergency. All doors have to unlock in emergency. The great example there would be fire alarm activation, right? So you're in a data center or something, and yes, you're supposed to badge in, badge out, and if somebody else has their door open, somebody could stand there kind of laughing at you through the glass, like waving at you, not letting you get out because, they're holding the door open on their side. But if the fire alarm goes off, yeah, your door's going to work just fine. You're going to be able to get out of there. There's one other term that we can cover, and that would be a safety interlock. Not a security interlock, but a safety interlock. This is for environments where there are unique hazards. In this case, though, you're not really caring about restricted access control. Many times, these are actually subsections of other structures where, let's assume, most of the people in the building are already authorized to be there. But in this case, the doors are normally unlocked, so anyone can just approach one of the doors, operate the door easily. However, opening one door will cause the opposite door to lock and remain locked until the first door shuts. All doors, again, they will always unlock during fire alarm activation or any other emergency conditions. But the use case here would be things like clean rooms, labs, many times certain medical facilities might even have these, where you don't expect everyone to be walking around with a specific badge that they need to boop everywhere. However, you do want to prevent flow of, let's say, air or contaminants from getting in and out of that vestibule. So you inconvenience people slightly during normal operation. But again, abnormal operation, emergencies, all doors will unlock. And you can see that here. You can see these indicating lights on this particularly safety interlock door. They're saying, hey, you're not authorized, this door's locked, it's going to be unlocked, click, click, bang, bang. But there's an override button right there for emergencies. Emergencies always trump whatever the design intent is of that interlock. So again, the term Mantrap gets really overused in this industry. Almost never do we see genuine Mantraps or Sallyports in civilian structures. What we typically see are control vestibules, and that is a term you can generally always use without being wrong, even if it doesn't sound as flashy. If desired, you can drill down to specific terms like safety interlock, if there's some manner of access control system, or security interlock, if anyone can operate the door unless the other one is open. Those terms clarify how and when the doors on either side will lock or unlock. But it's not a man-trap if folk can always still egress, especially during emergencies. So hopefully that helps disambiguate some terms for you, whether you're securing a sensitive environment or, just something on your own. Either way, I don't tell you things like this to make anybody feel silly or dumb. It's just because we mix terms up a lot, and it's nice to know what things really should mean and what they really should be. So I'll be back home eventually, wherever that winds up being, or maybe you'll see me at an upcoming RTA class. In fact, you know what? We've got a few seats left in CMOE. It's the brand new Covert Methods of Entry, completely retooled, all new equipment, all new stuff, all new ways of running the class. I'll check with Bobek. But the giveaway this week, I don't know if I can do free seats in the class, but I'm going to reach out to a number of you with we're going to call it half off, maybe even more than that. I'm going to talk to Bobek and see what he thinks. But yeah, look for an email. I know the class is coming up quick. It's going to be like a week from now. You're going to be punching me if you're angry. You're like, I didn't win. What am I going to use this for? Give it to a friend of yours. Tell them to sign up for the class. Come find me in Vegas. That's where I'll be. All right. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing in the class or outside, stay safe out there.